Burial, 2022, is a historical thriller set against the backdrop of the final days of World War II. Directed by Ben Parker, the film follows a group of Soviet soldiers tasked with a mission of profound symbolic importance, transporting Adolf Hitler's remains back to Moscow. The movie delves into the complexities of war, the psychological burdens carried by its survivors, and the moral ambiguities that arise in the fog of conflict. The film opens with a stark and desolate landscape, an Eastern European forest, eerily quiet and cloaked in mist. It's 1945, and the world is in the throes of the final brutal moments of World War II. The German Reich has crumbled, and the Allied forces are closing in on Berlin. However, the remnants of the Nazi regime and other hostile forces still pose a threat, making the mission at the center of Burial not only perilous but deeply symbolic. At the heart of this story is Brana Vasilieva, a stoic and determined Soviet officer leading a small unit of soldiers on a mission unlike any other. Their objective is to transport the body of Adolf Hitler from Berlin to Moscow, a task that, if successful, will serve as Stalin's ultimate propaganda victory, a tangible representation of the Soviet triumph over Nazism. From the outset, it's clear that this mission is not just another wartime operation. The significance of transporting Hitler's remains goes beyond the practical. It's a mission laden with symbolic and psychological weight. For Stalin, displaying Hitler's body in Moscow is a way to solidify his power and demonstrate the absolute defeat of Nazi Germany. For the soldiers tasked with this mission, however, the journey is fraught with dangers, not only from the enemy forces still lurking in the shadows but also from within themselves, as they grapple with their own war-torn psyches. As the film progresses, we are introduced to Brana and her team. Brana is portrayed as a hardened and capable leader, someone who has seen the horrors of war and has learned to compartmentalize her emotions to survive. Her stern demeanor and unwavering focus on the mission make her a natural leader, but it also distances her from the rest of her team, who have their own doubts and fears about the task ahead. The soldiers in her unit are a diverse group, each representing different facets of the Soviet army's makeup during the war. There's Lukash, a young and idealistic soldier who still clings to a sense of morality despite the brutality he's witnessed. Then there's the grizzled veteran Dmitry, whose cynicism masks deep emotional scars. The tension within the group is palpable, as the soldiers wrestle with the enormity of their task and the personal demons that haunt them. The journey begins under the cover of darkness, with the soldiers carefully transporting Hitler's body, encased in a simple wooden coffin, through the dense forest. The decision to travel by night is strategic. Avoiding detection by the enemy is crucial. However, the darkness also amplifies the sense of isolation and fear that permeates the group. Every rustle in the trees, every distant sound, is a potential threat. The forest, with its labyrinthine pathways and oppressive silence, becomes a character in its own right, representing the unknown dangers that lie ahead. As they move deeper into the forest, the group encounters their first major obstacle, a checkpoint manned by what appears to be a group of German soldiers. This encounter is fraught with tension, as Brana and her team must decide whether to engage or attempt to bypass the checkpoint undetected. The scene is a masterclass in suspense, with the soldiers' every movement and decision carrying life-or-death consequences. The situation escalates quickly. A firefight ensues, and the Soviet soldiers are forced to engage the enemy. The battle is brutal and chaotic, with bullets ripping through the night air. The Soviets manage to eliminate the German soldiers, but not without sustaining casualties of their own. This early skirmish sets the tone for the rest of the film, establishing the high stakes and the ever-present danger that the characters face. Following the skirmish, the group presses on, but the tension within the ranks begins to mount. The loss of their comrades weighs heavily on the soldiers, exacerbating the already strained relationships within the group. Brana's leadership is tested as she tries to keep the team focused on the mission, but the psychological toll of the war and the stress of their task begin to take their toll. As they venture further into enemy territory, the soldiers start to encounter signs that they are being followed. Unseen figures move through the trees, and strange symbols carved into the bark suggest that they are being hunted. It soon becomes clear that the group is being tracked by a band of Nazi loyalists, determined to prevent Hitler's body from reaching Moscow. These loyalists, known as Wehrwolves, are a fanatical group of guerrilla fighters who refuse to accept the fall of the Third Reich and are committed to disrupting the Soviet mission at any cost. The Wehrwolves are portrayed as ruthless and relentless, using guerrilla tactics to harass and ambush the Soviet soldiers. They are driven by a twisted sense of loyalty to Hitler, viewing the mission to recover his body as their last stand. Their presence adds an additional layer of danger to the already perilous journey, forcing Brana and her team to be constantly on guard. The film delves into the psychological warfare that ensues between the Soviet soldiers and the Wehrwolves. The loyalists use psychological tactics to instill fear and paranoia among the soldiers, leaving cryptic messages and staging macabre displays with the bodies of fallen soldiers. These tactics begin to take a toll on the Soviets, eroding their morale and making them question their own sanity. The tension within the group reaches a breaking point when one of the soldiers, already on edge from the constant threats, begins to suffer from hallucinations. He becomes convinced that the forest is haunted, that the spirits of the dead are watching them, and that they are being punished for their mission. This descent into madness highlights the psychological strain that the soldiers are under, as they grapple with the horrors of war and the moral implications of their task. Branna tries to keep the group together, but the cracks are beginning to show. The stress of the mission and the constant threat of attack weigh heavily on her, and she starts to question her own decisions. The burden of leadership becomes almost unbearable as she struggles to maintain control over a group of soldiers who are slowly unraveling. As the group nears the end of their journey, the stakes are raised even higher. The werewolves, realizing that their time is running out, launch a final desperate attack on the Soviet soldiers. This climactic battle is brutal and chaotic, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The forest becomes a battlefield, with gunfire echoing through the trees and the ground littered with the bodies of the fallen. In the midst of the chaos, Branna is forced to make a series of difficult decisions. She must weigh the mission's success against the lives of her soldiers, and the moral cost of her choices becomes increasingly apparent. The film explores the themes of duty, sacrifice, and the moral ambiguities of war, as Branna is confronted with the reality that there are no easy answers in a situation as complex and fraught as this one. The battle culminates in a tense standoff between Branna and the leader of the werewolves. This confrontation is more than just a physical battle, it's a clash of ideologies, with Branna representing the Soviet desire for victory and retribution, and the werewolf leader embodying the fanatical loyalty to a defeated regime. The two engage in a brutal fight, with each blow symbolizing the larger conflict between their respective nations and ideals. In the end, Branna emerges victorious, but the cost is staggering. The majority of her team has been killed, and she is left to grapple with the psychological and emotional toll of the mission. The film doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of war, showing the physical and mental scars that it leaves on those who survive it. With the werewolves defeated, Branna and the few remaining soldiers finally reach their destination. They bury Hitler's body in an unmarked grave, completing their mission. The act of burial is symbolic, representing not only the literal burial of a man but also the burial of an era, the end of the Nazi regime, and the hope that such horrors will never be repeated. The film concludes with Branna standing over the grave, reflecting on the journey and the lives that were lost. The weight of her experiences is evident in her expression. She is a woman who has seen the worst of humanity and has been irrevocably changed by it. The final scene is somber and reflective, underscoring the film's exploration of the psychological and moral costs of war. Burial, 2022, is a powerful and haunting film that delves deep into the complexities of war and the human condition.